Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is Eric Hook. I'm a professor at the UCLA Sustainable LA School of Engineering, and more importantly for our event today, the director of the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge. Before we begin today's program, I want to review a few housekeeping tips for our audience members. Your microphone and video have been turned off to help minimize disruptions. However, if you have any questions during the event, please use the Q&A icon located in the bottom of your Zoom window. And if you experience any audio or visual problems, please type in the Q&A box and we'll try to address them right away. Finally, a recording of today's event will be made available and shared with all attendees. Slide 2, please. The UCLA Sustainable LA Grand Challenge was founded in 2013, the goal of coordinating UCLA's research and education around creating a sustainable Los Angeles in partnership with regional stakeholders. Since then, our roster of faculty, researchers, and scholars who are committed to tackling climate change and creating a thriving LA has grown to more than 250 in count, and it includes folks from nearly every discipline across campus. Our program aims to apply UCLA research, expertise, and education to help transform Los Angeles into the world's most sustainable megacity by 2050. And our vision is to make LA the most livable, equitable, resilient, clean, and healthy megacity, serving as an example for other megacities around the world. If we can do it in LA, we can do it anywhere. Next slide, please. Today, you're going to have the opportunity to hear from some of the leading authors of the Ecosystem Health Report Card, which is the fourth in a series of report cards issued by UCLA's Sustainable LA Grand Challenge since 2015. These report cards are the most comprehensive analyses of LA County sustainability topics to date. Data-driven report cards are designed to measure progress on sustainability goals and targets, identify areas of concern for policymakers, serve as a resource for researchers and managing agencies, and to engage the media and the public at large. You'll also hear from several external stakeholders and leading experts who can speak to the report card's potential impact on the city and the county. Next slide, please. So to recap, today's event will run until 3:30 p.m. We'll have a short, high-level presentation of the report card, followed by a panel discussion, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. Again, please use the Q&A function to type any questions you have for us, and we'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can during the time that we have available. I'm grateful to all the speakers and panelists for their participation today, and for each of you for tuning in to learn about this important work. Thank you for being here, and without further delay, allow me to introduce the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge Executive Director, Dr. Cassie Rausser, and Research and Policy Analyst Ann Youngdahl, who both co-authored this report and helped spearhead this project. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Eric. So this Ecosystem Health Report Card provides an in-depth look at the region's efforts in moving toward a more resilient environment and community for people and native wildlife. A healthy and improved ecosystem requires protecting and restoring high-quality habitats and native biodiversity, reducing ecosystem threats like wildfire and invasive species, and ensuring every Angeleno has access to nature and its benefits, such as clean water, shade, and respite through policy solutions that address the region's inequities. Before we dive into the report card, I do want to start by recognizing the incredible team of researchers and students that made this report card possible. Elizabeth Reed Wainscoat is the lead author on this report, and you will get to hear from her later today during our panel discussion. You will also hear from our co-author Ann Youngdahl during this presentation. Additionally, we'd like to acknowledge the generous support from the Anthony and Jean Pritzker Family Foundation for making this report possible and for being dedicated and visionary stewards of the environment and Los Angeles. Now on to the report. To evaluate the state of the county's ecosystems, we assessed 18 indicators and 23 breakouts across 4 categories. These categories include, in blue on the slide, land use and habitat quality, biodiversity, threats to ecosystem health, and community health and well-being. The difference between an indicator and a breakout is in the quality of data. An indicator is a metric used to evaluate progress in a given area. Ideally, the data are available countywide, the data are updated annually or on a regular basis, the data are easily obtainable, and the data are quantitative, which allows us to measure change over time. Because not all data fits those criteria, and sometimes there is additional information we feel is important to include, we also highlighted less robust data in breakouts when it is relevant. But we'll talk more about the indicators when we touch on each chapter, after we briefly go over the grades and key takeaways. I'm not going to keep you in suspense if you have not already seen the report. We gave the county an overall C+ grade, with grades ranging from a B in biodiversity to a C incomplete in land use and habitat quality. Grades were assigned in each category based on data availability and accuracy, compliance with regional targets where applicable, and historical improvements. We created a grading rubric and weighted individual indicators based on input from ecosystem experts. We accounted for extremely inadequate data on a topic by allowing for an incomplete grade. There's a lot of information wrapped up in this 160+ page report, but the key takeaways are here. And that is that LA County has extensive natural resources, including many unique habitats and rich biodiversity. However, these natural resources are severely degraded due to urban sprawl, pollution, and climate change. The region faces many ongoing threats, including wildfire and invasive species that impact human health, as well as our natural resources that we all need to survive. And access to these natural resources and the ecosystem services they provide is not equitably distributed. We will now hit on some highlights from each of the 4 chapters, providing a single indicator from each chapter, key findings from that chapter, and our recommendations for improving the grade. Los Angeles County has long been known for its sprawling suburbs outside a thriving urban center. But what is less known is that a majority of the county has remained natural. To evaluate LA County's land use and habitat quality, both terrestrial and aquatic, we looked at these indicators and assigned a C, but incomplete grade. The indicators are land cover and natural area, protected areas, habitat connectivity and fragmentation, riparian habitat condition, and kelp canopy coverage. Today, we'll dive a little deeper into the land cover and natural area indicator. And I will walk you through these 2 maps. The map on the left shows land cover in Los Angeles County using data from 2004 and 2011. Note that all of our maps are of the entire county. The land area classifications were the same used in the city's biodiversity analyses. And as you can see from this map, over 64% of the land is natural area. That is the area colored in green. The next largest type of land use in LA County is developed urban area at just over 28%. I want to note that it wasn't easy to map this information on land use, and that we had to combine 2 sets of data from 2 different years. The lack of more recent data and of more comprehensive data for the entire county are 2 reasons this chapter received an incomplete grade. The map on the right shows how much of the natural area identified in the first map, still green on this map, is actually protected. The orange overlay depicts land area classified as protected at some level by the California Protected Areas database in 2018. We found that just over 50% of natural area is protected. We also looked at how much of the natural land falls within the county's significant ecological areas, using the yellow overlay on the map, and found that 33% of natural area is within a significant ecological area. And 13% of natural area falls within both a California protected area and a significant ecological area. It is important to note that significant ecological areas are not protected like California protected areas and are not necessarily protected from further development. What the Significant Ecological Area Program does do is designate these as areas with irreplaceable biological resources. We don't have time to dive into all of the indicators, so here provide the key findings from the Land Use and Habitat Quality chapter. As I covered on the previous slide, 64.6% of land cover in LA County is natural. 50.62% of that natural area is protected. Only 33% of the county lives within close proximity to natural area. 57.4% of critical habitat corridors are protected. 52.8% of rare vegetation alliances are protected. Kelp canopy coverage has increased 49% from 2013 to 2018. And from 2015 to 2018, only 24% of stream miles were likely intact. For each chapter in the report, we provide recommendations tailored to individual indicators for how to improve the grade. We classified these recommendations under data needs, action, and policy. Based on the findings for land use and habitat quality, we recommend the following. For data, to update spatial analyses of natural area, habitat connectivity, habitat quality, and protection compliance. For actions, set up a habitat quality monitoring program, protect and restore critical habitat corridors and kelp beds, coastal wetlands, and riparian habitat. And for policy, to protect 100% of the natural area and critical habitat corridors. Restrict the development within 100 feet of a channelized river or stream and 300 feet of a soft bed river or stream. We'll now move on to biodiversity, and I'm turning over the presentation to my co-author, Ann Youngdahl.
Thank you, Cassie. So for biodiversity, when we talk about biodiversity, is the variety of species in a given area that is simply all of the different plants and animals. Los Angeles County lies within one of only 36 globally recognized biodiversity hotspots and is the second most biologically diverse county in the nation. The county is also part of California Floristic Province, which includes approximately 8,000 plant species and over 3,400 taxa endemic to the region. The vastness of LA County's natural habitats and the quantity of species makes it extremely difficult to assess. Thus, researchers often rely on key indicator species to monitor overall ecosystem health and prioritize areas of conservation. And that is how we evaluated biodiversity here across the following indicators and ultimately assigning a B grade. Those indicators are native plant and animal diversity, bird population trends, rocky intertidal species population trends, marine fish and invertebrate population trends, and community science. We included community science as an indicator in this chapter because of the usefulness of community science platforms like iNaturalist, and because short-term and or species-specific community science initiatives are important tools for engaging the public, which ultimately increases support for enacting measures to protect biodiversity. Birds are one of the groups of species whose population trends we examined more closely because their populations are measurable and ubiquitously distributed across a habitat. The maps presented here depict breeding bird species richness and breeding bird species of conservation concern across LA County. The map on the left is the bird species richness, or the number of different bird species present. Overall, bird species richness was highest in known natural areas, including the Angeles National Forest and the Santa Monica Mountains. However, on the map on the right, you can see species richness specifically for bird species of conservation concern, which includes endangered, threatened, or sensitive bird species. These were found in smaller pockets in the southeastern section of the Angeles National Forest and near the northern edge of the county. This is a narrow snapshot of a larger analysis, and we encourage you to explore the rest of the contextual work in the full report. A few key findings from the biodiversity chapter are that community science has recorded over 4,200 native species in LA County. LA County is home to 38 endangered and 12 threatened species. And of the 50 endangered or threatened species, 18 species populations are increasing, 18 are stable, and 12 are decreasing, with no data for the remaining species. The recommendations for this chapter included, for data, monitoring regional species distribution and population for 100 native indicator species, For action, restoring native habitat critical for the survival of endangered and threatened native species. And for policy, prohibiting development of critical habitats for endangered species. In the next chapter, we evaluated threats to ecosystem health and assigned a C grade. The 2019 UN Biodiversity Report lists these top 5 threats to biodiversity in order of magnitude: changes in land and sea use, direct exploitation of organisms, climate change, pollution, and invasive species. We looked at the following indicators: wildfires, nighttime light pollution, impervious surfaces, vegetation greenness, and invasive species. Increasingly frequent or intense fires are not only a threat to humans' homes and health, but can greatly alter habitat and impact biodiversity as well. We looked at a range of data from CAL FIRE for this indicator, including the number and acreage of wildfires 300 acres and greater in the county for the period from 2000 through 2018. The map on the left shows wildfire frequency in LA County for this period. You can see how much of the natural area has burned at least once in the past 2 decades. Several areas throughout the Santa Monica Mountains, Angeles National Forest, and Los Padres National Forest burned more than once from 2000 to 2018, which may increase the risk of native vegetative type conversion to non-native plants. The map on the right illustrates fire hazard severity zones in state and local responsibility areas in LA County. The red represents very high fire hazard severity zones. Zones include the Santa Monica Mountains and associated coastal areas, Rancho Palos Verdes, areas around the San Fernando Valley, and several other locations in both coastal and inland areas. Note that this does not include the fire hazard severity zones in federally responsible areas, primarily in the San Gabriel Mountains and the Northwestern County area. Approximately 29% of LA County's total natural area is categorized as state or local responsibility very high fire hazard severity zone, 493,716 acres. However, nearly 78% of all natural area in the county includes at least some state or local responsibility very high fire hazard severity zone areas, about 1.3 million acres. This is a conservative estimate as it includes natural areas susceptible to wildfires that spread. Key findings from our Threats to Ecosystem Health chapter include that approximately 21% of LA County's total area is categorized as very high fire hazard, with nearly 2 million residents living in this area. From 1992 to 2012, there's a significant decrease in stable nighttime light within the Santa Monica Mountain National Recreation Area and San Gabriel Mountains, which is an important improvement thanks to concerted efforts. 81% of the land cover is pervious in LA County, and the region experienced a significant decrease in greenness from 2000 to 2018. Our recommendations for this chapter are: for data, monitor invasive indicator species populations and track new potential threats. For action, place a greater emphasis on fire prevention techniques, create a county plan to increase pervious surfaces in high need areas, and create an invasive species management plan for the county. And for policy, no development or rebuilding in high fire hazard zones, create standards for nighttime light in sensitive habitats, keep the net percentage of impervious surfaces at or below the current 19% of the county, and no sale of invasive species. I'll now turn the presentation back over to Cassie.
Thank you, Anne. In our last chapter, we looked at the interaction of biodiversity, the land, and community health and well-being, and assigned a C grade. Historically, human reliance on ecosystem health has been vastly undervalued, but current research on the value of natural areas and the flora and fauna that thrive in them demonstrates how essential their existence is for our well-being. Increasing access to nature and ensuring that nature and ecosystems themselves are healthy is essential to restoring and maintaining community health and improving overall human well-being. The indicators included in our final chapter are urban heat island and heat-related illness, park and recreation access, and urban tree canopy. The indicator that we will look at more closely in this chapter is park and recreation access, which comes directly from the county's 2016 Parks and Recreation Needs Assessment. Access to parks promotes health and well-being in urban communities by providing opportunities for outdoor recreation, community engagement, and access to nature. The map on the left shows park and open space throughout the county by type: local parks, regional recreation parks, regional open space, and natural areas. A total of 3,023 parks and open space were inventoried countywide in 2016, representing a total of 901,647 acres. The map on the right illustrates access to these parks. According to the Trust for Public Land, most pedestrians are willing to walk half a mile or about 10 minutes to access parks and recreational facilities. Areas in green show households that are within half mile of a park or open space, while areas in red show areas that are farther than half-mile walk. In 2016, only 49% of the county population lived within a half-mile walking distance of a local park, regional recreation park, or regional open space. Key findings from this chapter and all of its indicators include that in 2018, the rate of heat-related emergency department visits in LA County was 13 for every 100,000 people. 49% of the county population lives within a half-mile walking distance of a local park, regional recreation park, or regional open space, as we demonstrated in the previous slide. And that 10% of urban LA County is covered by tree canopy. Our recommendations for improving the grade for this chapter are for data to determine areas covered by heat trapping surfaces, analyze the percent of population that can access natural area via public transit, collect neighborhood scale data on urban tree health and maintenance needs. For action, to design and manage parks to reflect needs and values of surrounding communities, create an urban tree management plan for the county that prioritizes biodiversity. And for policy, to ensure access to a public cooling center within a quarter-mile walk and/or a 10-minute transit commute, provide green space in all new parks, and to allocate public funds spent on the urban tree canopy to areas with highest need first. This concludes our overview of the report. But before we finish, we want to say a big thank you to all the other contributors and reviewers on the report listed here. We could not have done it without all of them. So this concludes the presentation portion, and now we are going to move into our panel discussion on ecosystem health in LA County. We are very fortunate to have with us today the following individuals: Alina Bokde, the Chief Deputy Director for LA County Department of Parks and Recreation; Dojiri, the Assistant General Manager for LA City Sanitation and Environment; Tom Gillespie, a professor at UCLA in the Department of Geography and the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability; and the report's lead author and former Sustainable LA Grand Challenge Senior Research and Policy Analyst, Elizabeth Reed Wainscoat, who is now the Urban Wildlands Campaigner for the Center for Biological Diversity. Welcome, panelists, and thank you so much for joining us. Okay, are we all here? It looks like we are. So today I'm going to start off with a question related to urbanization, because I think that's what most people think about when they think about Los Angeles, and how urbanization poses such a major threat to species, of course, to habitat, but also to community health. So I'm going to direct this first question to you, Mas. And that is, what are some of the toughest challenges, in your opinion, facing our region when it comes to development and land use planning?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. And I wanted to let everybody know I did read the report card cover to cover, and I think it's wonderful. It's a really valuable asset, and it will be really useful for our program. To answer the question, I want to tell you a really quick story. When we first initiated the biodiversity program and we had a stakeholder meeting, I was really proud of that meeting. I thought it went really well. And but at the end, a stakeholder, an attendee came up to me and said, you know, the city of Los Angeles is really good at developing plans. You're not so great at implementing them. And I took I don't want to say offense, but I told her that I didn't believe that was true, particularly for my department. I couldn't speak for other departments, but it got me thinking. We're going to put a lot of work, I knew, for this biodiversity program moving forward. This was in 2017. And I didn't want all our hard work to be in vain. I didn't want our reports just sitting on people's bookshelves collecting dust. So I thought, how can I make sure that this program moves forward and is implemented in perpetuity? And I thought the way we could do that is embed our biodiversity program and recommendations into a policy. And so I think to answer to your question, the toughest challenge will be for us to develop a biodiversity policy in conjunction with the Department of City Planning, because they're the department that's in charge of developing policy and for the city. But what we can do is we can get ideas and suggestions and convey those to the Department of City Planning, which we are actually currently doing. And to give a plug for UCLA, a person on our biodiversity team, Peggy Nguyen, actually is a doctoral candidate at UCLA, and she's the one that's putting all these suggestions and recommendations together for city planning. I think the second part of that is working with developers, landowners, and the public, because we may get some pushback. They might not understand what we mean exactly by planting native plants and attracting native animals. And they may think that the landscaping will look terrible, not aesthetically pleasing. So we're going to have to work with them closely to make sure that we incorporate all their comments and suggestions. So I think those two areas will be our biggest challenges.
Great, thank you, Mas. Many people probably know that LA County is made up of over 88 cities. And so sort of the second part of this question is related to how do we incorporate a more holistic regional planning effort to ensure that our ecosystems thrive as our region continues to develop? I'm going to throw that to you again, Mas or Alina, if you'd like to step in and answer that, because it's really challenging, I know, to work across the county, especially in spaces such as significant ecological areas that have, their jurisdiction falls under all of these different city jurisdictions.
If you want, I can jump in.
Sure.
Okay. I think one of the things that I was thinking about on this question is, the city of Los Angeles developed a customized LA specific biodiversity index. And by sharing that, I think it's really important to communicate what we did and the results, the end product of our efforts to other cities in the United States, as well as global cities throughout our globe, so that they perhaps can follow our footsteps. And that would provide some sort of continuity and coordination. Our biodiversity index does not only measure where we are right now, the baseline, and where we will be 3 years from now or 10 years from now, so that it is more of a performance metric, but it also provides a pathway on how to get to where we want to go. That is maintaining and enhancing biodiversity within the city. Another way that I want to answer that question is Andy Schrader of CD5, and I know he's on this call. He's organized a regional meeting with Ventura, LA County, with the city of LA chairing, so that we can communicate and coordinate and share information so that we are more in line with each other. So I think that that's really important. I think an event like this it really helps move that communication and coordination forward. Also, attending international meetings, like the one I attended in 2019 at the University of Pennsylvania, and conveying to the attendees and getting information from them at the Hotspot Cities Symposium at the University of Pennsylvania. And right after that, there was a symposium on designing with nature. And also being involved with cities with nature. It's an international group. It's kind of like an environmental Facebook where all the cities can actually share information and coordinate and obtain lessons learned. I think that's a really important portal to join.
Hey, maybe just quickly, Casey, to add to the question and the answer is that I think for really looking at regional coordination, there are, as Mas already pointed out, I mean, there are efforts that really look at regional solutions to problems, and both at a policy level, but also at a infrastructure kind of public investment level. And I think that when it comes to whether we're looking at, a master planning effort like the LA River, for example, we have to look at the whole stretch of the river and not use jurisdictional, boundaries to determine like the breadth of and scope of the project, as well as, a major public infrastructure investment around stormwater through Measure W. That the work around Measure W is based on watershed areas, and again, looking at regional solutions for water. So, I think it takes leadership and it takes that vision. And I think, as Mas mentioned, I've also spoken with Andy on, the regional efforts on biodiversity in order to lead some of this work. And so I know there definitely is a lot of collaboration with our regional planning department here in the county. I know our work in Parks and Recreation, we look at the work from a regional perspective. And in fact, as we were even managing, a lot of the public health issues related to COVID and access to open space or trails or parks, we did that work in partnership with other cities and trail managers, state conservancies that manage land. And so I think long gone are the days of really looking at things in kind of one jurisdiction and one lane in terms of solutions. And so I think, definitely applaud kind of the need to address these issues has to be regional. And the good thing is there are models, there are systems, and it's really about, really creating some of that leadership to move the needle forward. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Alina and Mas. I'm going to move on to another question that's related. Similar to urbanization, of course, we know that climate change poses major threats to species, habitat, and community health. And for this question, I'm going to sort of give you each just a couple of seconds to tell me what you think your number one, or what is the number one toughest challenge that is climate related, that is facing the region as it relates to biodiversity, habitats, and our community health. And I will start with you, Elizabeth.
Well, I think I'll cover this in a little bit more detail later, but as you highlighted, I believe in chapter 3, wildfire is, I think, in the forefront of all of our minds as we head into wildfire season, getting closer to the peak in August and September, while the state is in a drought, both climate related. So I think the management of our natural lands with that understanding that climate is only going to increase our risk of wildfire is really critical.
All right, thank you. How about you, Tom? If everyone wildfires.
I mean, climate change. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll stay away from wildfires, but climate change is real. This year will probably be the hottest year ever on record. Last year was the hottest year on record with 2016. And this impacts the distribution of species. So as time goes on over the next 25 to 50 years, it's very, very clear that species will be moving north in some cases, and to be able to really understand that and helping them mitigate some of these real extreme temperature changes is going to be very important.
That's a really great point, Tom, and I think something that most people don't think about. And when we're talking about species, of course, we're not just talking about plants and animals, but we're talking about the different infectious diseases that those species carry. So we see different distribution in that as well. And of course, something close to my heart is the huge decrease in the monarch butterfly population, very likely in some ways related to climate change. How about you, Mas?
I just read about the Salus Sea, the marine biologist up in University of British Columbia, estimating that 1 billion, that's with a B, intertidal organisms are either have perished or will perish. As everybody on the call knows, the intertidal environment is very harsh and ever changing environment. Low tide, high tide, you're exposed to water, you're underwater, you're out of water, etc. So the high temperatures with the climate change really affected the mussels, the clams, the sea urchins, the starfishes, etc. And 1 billion have either perished or will perish total. That's really a surprising number to me. So, and very depressing, to be honest.
Thank you, Mas. Alina.
I would say for me, it's really the disproportionate impact to low-income communities of color. Climate change is impacting us all, but I think, having access to resources makes a difference about how you're able to kind of manage the impacts. And so I think, particularly communities that are addressing significant environmental justice issues, do suffer greater impacts to the climate change. So that's, for me, one of the critical challenges moving forward is how do we address the equity issues around climate change?
Yes, absolutely. I think we saw something, related to that was very prevalent in the last year while we were going through the pandemic, as we're still going through the pandemic, and that's access to the cooling spaces, especially in those communities. When we had a pandemic, you weren't supposed to gather, but yet you didn't have air conditioning in your home, and so there was the greater impact related to heat during that time.
Right.
Of course. Excuse me. Here I am, the one who did not turn off my notifications. I don't know how. All right, I'm going to move on to another question. Put myself on mute. I'm going to move on to the one related to wildfires. And so this one I'm directing to Elizabeth. And that's that, wildfires, of course, are on the top of all of our minds, unfortunately. And the report does show that 21% of LA County is located within a very high fire hazard area, and that nearly 2 million of our county residents live within those areas. So how can we reduce wildfire risk to both our residents and to our biodiversity and habitats?
So this one to me is really easy and straightforward. The science is all in alignment. We need to stop building in these wildfire hazard areas. Every new development increases the risk of ignition because people are the ones who either accidentally or on purpose ignite these wildfires. And so we need to prioritize our public resources in hardening existing communities who are very vulnerable to wildfire, instead of backing unsustainable sprawl development that the private insurance market has already passed on. So this is something that we really like to emphasize at the center. You know, the private insurance market will not insure these new developments. So it's really, you know, I think a case of where there's just complete alignment with the science and the economics of everything. We need to stop investing in sprawl. The challenge is really going to be changing the mindset, I think, with Southern California culture. It has, you know, historically been defined by sprawl, and the American dream of owning a single family house is really embedded in this region. But that goes against everything we know about sustainable and efficient urban centers. So we have to change people's perspectives on what LA can and should look like, as well as the benefits of dense urban living, so we can shift the framework from, you know, sacrificing single family neighborhoods to enjoying the communal resources provided by multi-use areas and multifamily housing. I think that the Building and Industry Association has done a really good job at shaping the narrative around California's housing crisis, and they claim that we need sprawl development to meet the housing needs of the state. But they're invested in sprawl because it is cheaper for them to build outside city centers. And however, the cost of building out that infrastructure to these new communities and protecting these communities from wildfire just falls on the taxpayers. And we really believe that people have a right to affordable housing near job centers, schools, parks, and public transit, and that they shouldn't have to commute 4 hours a day because developers want to maximize profit. So we're really promoting the build up, not out model.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Did anyone else want to speak to the question related to wildfires?
I think Elizabeth did a great job of answering that question. And this is just something that won't go away for a long time, is what she pointed out.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to move on to another question. LA County is often referred to as a concrete jungle, yet we have very diverse landscapes and ecosystems, as we saw in the report. And we are home to the largest number of threatened and endangered plants and animals in any county in the continental US. 12 threatened and 38 endangered. So with projected growth across our region, how do we balance that population growth while preserving natural spaces and habitats so that we can achieve no loss in native biodiversity, which is a target in both the city and county sustainability plans? And I'm directing this one at Tom.
Thank you. You know, as Elizabeth said, Los Angeles really needs to grow up and not out. These urban sprawl models are really, really outdated. And that is clearly like the #1 thing. Another thing is creating these ecosystem report cards like you do here for other Mediterranean cities would just be really, really important. All 5 Mediterranean regions are biodiversity hotspots. They have very specific issues to Mediterranean climates of dry summer, wet winters, wildfires. And I think that will continue to grow in the future. And then another thing that I think has been very helpful is these grand challenges programs where you get scientists, practitioners, nonprofits together and focus all on a problem in one area is just a great idea. I mean, I myself work in the tropics, but when you get all these professors from UCLA, USC, these other places focusing in on these questions, it really pushes the science forward, which I think is very impressive. And then just the last thing, if I may, is one of my favorite things about the report card is the actions and the policy. Like you've really spelled out the things that should be done and considered. And I just think this is very helpful moving forward.
Great, thank you, Tom. I'm going to direct the second half of this question to you, Moss, because of course, I know you have a lot of experience, working collaboratively and sharing your best practices with cities across the nation and even across the globe. So California did recently become an official observer to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, which is the global treaty to protect biodiversity. 196 nations will meet this year to consider a global biodiversity framework. What lessons have we learned here in LA that could be shared with other urbanized regions and megacities facing similar challenges? You're on mute, Moss, which is totally fair since I just had my notifications go off.
I think that what we have to understand is if we're going to really enhance our biodiversity, it has to be done at the local level. It's really not at the global level or at the national level. It really is at the level where you're going to implement changes to the environment to improve the environment. And so we have to really focus on that. And I think that customized LA Biodiversity Index and sharing it with them is really important. Sharing the information on Cities with Nature, that environmental Facebook that I mentioned, the portal for biodiversity information sharing. But also I think two of the really important lessons that we learned in LA was during this pandemic, actually. We learned, number one, how important open spaces, beaches, and parks are to us. I mean, that was certainly a big asterisk of what we learned. The other important lesson we learned during the pandemic was that we can actually improve our environment. You know, when everybody started well, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people started telecommuting. They refrained from going to huge get-togethers, etc. The traffic improved, the air quality improved, our entire environment improved, and so it tells us, it gives us a message that we really can make a change and we really can make a difference if we all work together collectively. And I think that's a huge message.
Great, thank you. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mas, but is the Los Angeles Biodiversity Index the first city-specific index in the nation with regard to biodiversity?
Yeah, you know that it's actually based and modified from the Singapore Index that was developed, I think it was about 12 years ago or so by Dr. Alina Chen. And I actually was invited to the 10th anniversary of the modification or revision of that index. And I was invited actually by Dr. Alina Chen. And so our LA Biodiversity Index, when we first measured the biodiversity within the city of LA using the Singapore Index, we realized there were a number of indicators, metrics that didn't fit us very well. We couldn't get the data. Data was hard to get. It was hard to parse out from different departments, et cetera. So, and some of them just didn't apply to us. And so we revamped it, customized it for the city of LA. We are the only city in the United States, certainly, that has a customized biodiversity index. And we're the second one that has developed one, second only to Singapore, around the globe.
Great, so a really great best practice to share. Did anyone else want to respond to sharing your ideas on best practices that we've developed and established here in the region that we could share globally? I feel like we're leaders in this area in so many ways. All right. We'll move on to the next question then. So Alina, I'm going to direct this question to you. One of the findings of the report card indicate that access to natural areas, green space, and ecosystem services is not equitably distributed. For instance, only 49% of the county's population lives within a half-mile walking distance to a local park or recreational area. This lack of access to natural and green space deprives many of our residents from receiving these vital ecosystem benefits. And as Mas pointed out, that was something that was really critical and important over the last year during the pandemic. I know that accessing those spaces saved me in so many ways. So Alina, how do we ensure greater equity so that all Angelenos have reasonable access to natural and green space? We'll start there.
Thank you. So just as talking about the use of parks and trails during COVID, I mean, we saw a 300 to 400% increase of use of our parks and trails. So we had at one of our trails one day in our trailhead, we had to close it down by noon because we had over 5,000 people come out. So I think as Mas, said, that is, we've always known, I think this group and panelists know the value of parks, open space, biodiversity, and trails. But I think COVID did absolutely demonstrate that in important ways. I think in terms of really thinking about kind of, how do we address equity around access? I know that in your presentation, you showed some of the data from the park needs assessment. And I can say that the Countywide Park Needs Assessment that was adopted in 2016, not only for us at the county, is our North Star on how we look at identifying priorities and determining policy around addressing equitable access, but it is a wealth of data that many other cities, counties, in fact, kind of across the nation, you mentioned, Trust for Public Land, have used the data pulled from the Park Needs Assessment to really lift up the importance of equity and importance of access. We looked at not only, access issues, but as well as density issues. So we know, a park that serves a, high density community has more impact than a park of same size in a low density neighborhood, as well as, looking at park acreage, park condition. And so this is a document that, in a lot of ways, I think does provide the framework and the roadmap of really identifying where should investments, public infrastructure investments happen, and where does the planning happen first to go into those areas where we have our map that shows the red areas, the orange areas of the high and very high need areas, that's where we really need to make our investment. And I know, again, as a base has really informed lots of other reports and data. I want to just talk a little bit about just the impact, not only to show around access, but who is, again, disproportionately impacted by the disparities and inequities. And it's low-income communities of color that have the least amount of access, have the least amount of park space. They also have the least amount of tree canopy, the highest urban, heat island impact, and so on and so on. And so, as we look to, again, really addressing some of our highest need areas, I just want to share a project that we as a county have been working on for a number of years. And I'm very excited that we are hopefully, we'll be getting to the end and opening up a new park in a community. This is the unincorporated community of Walnut Park, which is in the southeast part of Los Angeles. It is predominantly Latino, low income, mostly immigrant communities, and has about 16,000 people that live in this unincorporated community and have no parks. There are 0 parks in this community. And there were 2 small vacant pieces of property. We went after one. We were fortunate enough to get funding. We actually competed with a fast food restaurant, and we were able to secure the property. It was a half-acre site, got funding, and so we're currently went through a community design process with the community, but we are secured the funding, so we're in the process of developing this new park. Now, a half-acre park that is going to serve over 16,000 people in both, again, I know half acre doesn't sound like a lot, but we are going to pack a lot in terms of the trees, biodiversity. We are also working to put in a stormwater capture project, and we will be capturing about 326,000 gallons of water, infiltrating, capturing water, cleaning the water, And this will be draining a 32-acre drainage area in the community. So we're, a half-acre site that has not only will bring recreation, immediately change that figure for 16,000 people in terms of the access issue, but also, provide trees, provide a place for respite, and also for helping us to capture and clean water. So we're just really excited about, and really just the power of how, Mas also talked about the importance of very local solutions. And this is just an example of how a half-acre park, will have a tremendous impact in the community. So.
Oh, that's really great to hear. And you really touched on some of the other things that I was going to ask. And that's, how do you make those parks appropriate for the communities in which they are in, so that they are, desired and used by those communities, but also in increasing our green space and access to the parks, while at the same time trying to do a number of other things. And I'm really pleased to hear collaboration going on, so that you're integrating the biodiversity, you're thinking about the tree canopy, all at the same time.
Thank you. Yeah, we're, I think, as we're looking again at infrastructure investments, I mean, we have to look at, I know what we call kind of the multi-benefit impact of projects. So we have to look at how a project can really address, the whole environment that we're trying to obviously make sure everyone has access to. So.
Great. So I'm going to give us one last question here before I move into looking at some of the questions that came in from the attendees. So attendees, if you have any burning questions, please put them into the Q&A chat, and I'll try to go through and review those and present them to the panelists as we have time. But the closing question I want to give to each of you is related to opportunities. So when we started the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge, we really framed it in a way that was, yeah, we have all these incredible challenges related to climate change and achieving sustainability, but you can approach it in a couple of different ways. And the way we wanted to approach it was by looking at this as an opportunity. And I think we really saw that with the pandemic too, where, we have an opportunity here to make things better and different. So going back to the way things were isn't, that's not the way that we've been thinking about this. We've been thinking about opportunities for improvement. So I want you to think about what you think are the biggest opportunities here in LA County to improve the grades in the couple of different categories that we covered. And so I'm going to ask Tom first. So where do you think there are opportunities here in LA County with regard to threats to ecosystem health?
Thank you. Again, we have about 50 federally endangered species in Los Angeles County, and just very simple things like overlaying the critical habitats of federally listed species really identify areas along the coast and along the Santa Clara River where you just have a bunch of endangered species that are unprotected. And just a very simple analysis like this does give us some framework to go forward. And given that that's my interest, that's one of the avenues I like the most.
Great. With regard to land use and habitat quality, I'm going to throw this one to you, Ma. So what do you view as some of the biggest opportunities here in LA County with regard to that? I mean, we talked a lot about development today and its impacts. What are you thinking?
I'm going to take an example and a lesson learned from the National Wildlife Federation on their community wildlife habitat. We just recently got certified. The entire city of Los Angeles is now officially certified as a community wildlife habitat now. And we got that through the involvement of the residents, the schools, parks and recs, et cetera. And we had to garner a certain amount of total points in order to get it. And there's another category on public outreach and administration. And we did a lot of public outreach and presentations and that sort of stuff. So we got those points relatively quickly. I think getting the community involved is a huge opportunity. And I think Tom ended up alluding to that, and others, other panelists. I think the community science and community involvement are twofold. One, it really helps us collect the data for biodiversity, find out where we are, the status. But second, and maybe just as important, is we get the community, the residents of the county, to realize how important biodiversity is and how important ecosystem is. That's huge, because if we can get them on board, maybe we can get increased funding, which will further our cause. I think the idea that we don't have to tear down buildings and dig up impervious areas and have huge areas of native plants, but various residences and small parks and open areas in the community can plant native plants. A perfect example of this is the Esperanza Elementary School in downtown LA. If you go to that school, you can see the high rises of downtown LA. It's literally a stone's throw to downtown LA. And the principal there, Brad Rummel, planted, with the help of the community and students, planted native plants, got rid of some of the impervious areas, and he recorded 80 species of birds, and I think 15 species of pollinators, insects, etc. in a small plot right next to downtown LA. That's a perfect example of what we can do. We could create these stepping stone connectivities. It doesn't have to be contiguous, huge parks. It doesn't have to be that. It could be all the residences pitching in to improve the biodiversity of our county. So I think that's a huge list, and I think we can follow that sort of, I don't know, protocol or approach.
Great, thank you. So Alina, with regard to community health and well-being, what do you view as some of the biggest opportunities here in LA County?
For community health and well-being, I think that we've talked a lot about, I think, both the report card. I know I talked about the park needs assessment. There's also a ton of data out there that looks at the health inequities, disparities connected to, whether it's, the biodiversity, lack of open space, and how it impacts community health. And so, I think the opportunity is, one of the opportunities is, how we're making investments through all of the kind of conservation finance, public infrastructure, the funding that is out there, that voters have supported. How do we, again, make targeted investments to really address, the needs around addressing climate impact. And so I think that's a big opportunity, is to continue to use the data to help address the challenges and the issues, and utilizing, I think, what are some pretty important funding, opportunities to help to really, again, kind of leverage and bring resources into our most impacted areas. I think it's also what I'm also very excited about with this report card and the data and the recommendations that are in the report card is really helping. I think we have to also kind of change the conversation about Los Angeles County, in terms of getting, I think, the level of investment and support of funding and strategy that is, whether it be from the state or the federal, to that, you know, sometimes I think because we are so populous and such an urbanized, not the whole county, but very urbanized communities, that sometimes the opportunity isn't seen in Los Angeles County for having the level of impact that maybe in a more rural area would be. And so it's not about, you know, rural versus urban or anything, but I think that it is important to, you know, to make sure that the narrative does really also lift up the opportunities within a very urbanized context to, you know, be an important indicator for the 30 by 30 effort, for example, and what opportunities exist in more urbanized areas. And so I think there's a lot of wonderful work happening and a lot of data out there. And so I think it's just continuing to, again, for me, I think the opportunity is using that data, working with communities to make those investments in areas that are needed the most.
Absolutely. So Elizabeth, you're the lead author on the report. I wanted to just give you an opportunity to share with us, you know, I guess, what do you view as the biggest opportunities overall? You're very familiar with the entire report and outcomes. And then I have a couple specific questions for you that are coming from the audience.
Okay. Well, I think what I'm most excited about is this idea of reimagining LA. I think a lot of folks have mentioned this, but, you know, through the lens of much more, you know, intersectional work across different disciplines. So something that I really am hopeful for is getting alignment between environmental groups, and scientists, environmental justice organizations, affordable housing advocates, and anti-displacement people working to fight anti-displacement. If those groups can work together and get an aligned vision, I think that, you know, for the future of LA, I think, you know, that's the solution that we should be going towards. I'm not saying it's easy or that we're quite there yet, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of willingness for people who traditionally worked in silos to understand the benefits of working across discipline and ensuring that, you know, every policy, every project is that multi-benefit and it's not causing harm by solving one problem. So that's something that I'm just really excited to be a part of and to also just watch and support in any way possible. And I think, you know, data collection is the first step. But yeah, there's a lot of following steps that I think a lot of people are already engaged in and are ready to continue to contribute to.
Great, thanks so much. So I'm going to go for the easy questions first. So there's one specifically to Alina, and I think this is a yes or no question. So is the recapture that you discussed in the development of that park, is it a Measure W project?
Yes, my understanding is that Measure W will be some of the funds utilized for the project. Yeah.
Great. So a great collaborative way to come together and invest and fund these types of projects. Okay, so there's a couple, Elizabeth, related to, and I think, Tom, I think you could take this very easily as well, given your work in the Biodiversity Atlas and your contribution to the report card. And they are the LA specificity of this. So we covered all of LA County, but there's a couple of different questions related to how much of the work that we did in the report card could sort of be sparsed out so that the city of LA could use it.
Yeah, you know, I see a couple of questions, in particular from Andy, about how, you know, although this is countywide, how can this be applied to different cities? And a lot of the data that was used in the report card was put together by my graduate student, Monica Dimson, and she has it so that you can just click on an area and download the data, and then you can customize it to your own city. So if you wanted to know what, you know, the greenness in the unincorporated area of Marina Del Rey, you can do that. Or if you really want to know the night light intensity in different areas, you can download it, basically tailor it to each region.
Great. And I know that's maybe not the case with other indicators. Did you want to add to that, Elizabeth, for those that were outside of the scope of Tom's contribution?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was alluded to in your presentation, but one of the challenges of this report card was that unlike the previous report cards, that we could really be more stringent on the type of data we used, we had to get very creative and combine data sets that sometimes, and so I think that's why there was an emphasis on, next steps. A lot of it is in actually collecting data. So I think that it's really indicator specific, and therefore it's definitely something that, I think we could help coordinate and point you to if there is a specific indicator that you're interested in and that you wanted data in a specific area. But it's really hard to make generalizations across the whole report card because all the different sources that we're applying to. But I will, reiterate Tom's point that the Biodiversity Atlas of LA that his team has put together is publicly available, a great visualization that you can use, and then you can also download the data and select specific sites as it fits for your needs.
So we just provided the link to the Biodiversity Atlas, which is different than both the Biodiversity Index of the city and different than the Ecosystem Health Report Card. It is a Biodiversity Atlas for LA County, that Tom Gillespie's team has spearheaded. All right, there's another question, very relevant again, like wildfires, drought. So the question is related to, how do we increase, improve, create more green space and biodiversity with, and plants throughout the region without the rain. So how does this work, for example, Alina, in the park that you're talking about? If there's no rain, how do we maintain that? Moss, if there's no rain, how do we maintain street trees, right? These are very real challenges, not just for the individual, with their garden in the backyard or a front lawn, but hopefully no one has lawns. But anyway, either one of you can sort of address that from your perspective.
I mean, I'll just go quickly first. So I think when we're looking at obviously the design of a new park or adding to an existing park, I mean, we obviously are looking at drought tolerant plants, native plants, and being very thoughtful about, what is getting planted and to help, address the drought environment that we're in. Additionally, we also incorporate technology to really help address issues of even irrigation. So for example, at a number of our parks, we have smart irrigation controllers. So when we're, if we go through a period in a month or, I know we're in the drought, but where it's raining, that our irrigation system won't turn on and water. So we're not, so again, we're using technology as a way to also, try to conserve and kind of manage the watering of plants. So that's really critical. I think, again, we look at utilizing every inch of our property to be able to look at, how do we capture water? How do we clean water? How do we infiltrate water? And, ways to be able to support, water going back into the water table through whether it's also utilizing like permeable, pavement. And so when it does rain, what are we doing to kind of capture that water and put it back into the water table and clean it? So I think also really instituting the type of landscape that does, again, support the environment that we're in and while supporting, biodiversity and kind of diversity in our, in our flora. So.
Great. Thank you. So we have a question related to the selling of invasive species. So the question is, how can we stop nurseries from selling invasive species? Is there any legislation around this? Tom, do you know?
I really don't know, but I see these these invasive species still for sale, like fountain grass, which is taking over every south-facing slope of Los Angeles. And this plant loves fire, and once it will burn, it will promote itself into the native areas and just proliferate. So I don't know legally how this is done. I think it's done by city, but it is really important to be very aware of the invasive plants that nurseries are selling, and or of course pet stores and things like that.
Very true. All right, thank you. All right, we have a question around the significant ecological areas. I did allude to the fact that their protection status is not really a protection status. It's not like a California protection. And so the question is, how can the county use the significant ecological area designation as both an obstacle to certain forms of development and to create some semblance of protection for the habitat connection and the preservation of our fragile biodiversity? That's a complicated question. Does anyone want to attempt answering that one?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I really like the idea of these ESAs because they're trying to identify areas that in the future should be some form of protected areas. So for instance, right now in California, they're trying to do 30-for-30, which is 30% of California will be protected by 2030. And they're going to get funding for that. And then again, if you can identify these ESAs, that gives us kind of a target where to look for these things. But the idea is it gets people and the general public used to understanding these areas are really important and why they're important. And then the next phase can go through, which is the implementation of protected areas.
Great. Thank you, Tom. So there's a question related to the very high fire hazard areas. I don't remember if I'm saying that classification correctly. And I think you maybe did answer this question, Elizabeth, because the question is around the topic of prohibiting development in the very high fire hazard severity zones. And then the other challenge within the region of the housing crisis. And so I know you talked about sort of building up, not out, or densification, not more sprawl. So I feel that you generally answered the question. The rest of it is, so far there has been a lack of political will to stop development. For example, this individual is from a senator's office, has run bills in this area, SB 55, and just this week, a compromise measure, SB 12, failed in the assembly. So Elizabeth, do you want to speak to that any more than you already have?
Yeah, I agree. It's one that's difficult and sometimes frustrating because the science is very clear, but the political climate at this time is just not supportive, because I think there needs to be more outreach and education amongst the general public on why it's so dangerous, and also the fact that it's not a target to existing communities who are living in this space, because it would be targeting new development. It's more, and that would allow for more public resources to go to hardening the people, the residents who are already living in this space, who need that help to harden their homes and ensure that there's safe evacuation routes, and that there's also resources going towards preventative measures to reduce the risk as much as possible. One narrative that we really want to fight is this idea that there's some way to harden a home to make it fireproof. And that's been an argument that, we can build new development here because we'll be meeting the highest fire code. And therefore, these communities will be safe. And while you can and should home harden as much as possible, there's no such thing as a home that's completely fireproof. So yeah, I think that, I mean, it's just a matter of getting more people to understand the science, and also I think for the affordable housing groups and for environmental organizations to get aligned on not just the vision of no development, but where can we develop and how, because I do agree when we're in a housing crisis, it's not helpful to just say, no, you can't develop here. You need to provide the solution as well. So I think that's where that collaboration is really needed.
Great, thank you. Tom, I see you're maybe looking at one of the questions in there that was directed toward you. So how landscape architecture firms can utilize this information, make adjustments to residential design projects and such, and how can they really get connected with the findings and knowledge coming out of, you know, the universities and other research centers. So, you know, we have a lot coming out. I mean, one of the goals, of course, of the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge is to help make those connections. But Tom, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to type an answer in there. I think we really should be cognizant of the fact that the resolution of our data that we use to study sustainability and biodiversity is just increasing just orders of magnitude. So right now we get an image of Los Angeles every day at 2 meters. Our GIS data is just getting bigger, so you can see, for instance, parcel level stuff. There's great websites that show you, for instance, each city and backyard, what the tree canopy cover is. So this is an ongoing process, but the geospatial data is becoming much more accurate to a point where people can download it and use it in the public domain.
Great, thank you. And I'm just going to pose one last question. The questions that we weren't able to get to, we'll take a look at those, and perhaps we can respond to them in the coming days. We also talked about posting a bit of something like a frequently asked questions related to this in a blog post event today. So the last one I want to pose to Alina and Tomas, and that is, how will the report card be utilized to guide policy and/or ordinances for the city planning department, parks and rec, etc.? And you don't have to speak for everyone, but.
Well, so I think for our department, we have been working internally and kind of across the county with other departments to look at what we're calling kind of a biodiversity plan and policy for what we can do within our system at Parks and Recreation. I mean, we oversee about 70,000 acres of land throughout Los Angeles County. So we think there's a huge opportunity to continue to support the biodiversity at our parks. And so I know that this report card, I've actually already shared it with our kind of lead staff working on our biodiversity work. We are also developing a sustainability plan for our department that does also take into account some of the strategies of the sustainable plan that was developed, kind of our county plan for kind of countywide, that includes some biodiversity goals. So there are different places where I think in terms of the work we're doing, both from looking at policy level goals around biodiversity, that we will be, incorporating the report card into and the data and the atlas. And so I think these are all important resources to, again, kind of guide our planning and our developments, with parks kind of moving forward. So I think there are definitely places where this will continue to kind of inform and help establish. And I'll just finally say we are also updating our park needs assessment to include a what we're calling the regional and rural update to the park needs assessment. And so there's also some work happening there in terms of mapping and data gathering that the report card and the atlas, I think, will also really help inform. So very excited about that.
Great, thank you. Mas, 30 seconds.
Okay, I took a look at the report card, as you know, and what I did was I took our LA Biodiversity Index to see how much overlap there was. And so we have the same indicators for habitat quality, land use, biodiversity, threats to ecosystem health, community health and wellness, et cetera. And so we're working right now, our biodiversity team at LA Sanitation and Environment is working on the first baseline using the LA Biodiversity Index, the customized index, not the Singapore, but the one we developed. And so we will be measuring a number of those. We work very closely with UCLA scientists, Dr. Dan Cooper, Dr. Travis Longcore, Dr. Isaac Brown, and Dr. Robert Fisher, who's actually with USGS. He's the lone person there, not from UCLA. And we worked on species of concern. And I know that the report card it recommended identifying 100 indicator species and following that. And I think we've identified 108. So we really are very much in tune with the report card. And we look forward to getting some findings for the city of LA, not for the entire county, but for the city of LA.
Great, thanks, Moss. And Eric's video here is an indication that we need to close up. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Super grateful for your participation today. And I am going to pass this on to Eric.
Thanks, Cassie. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in to hear about the report card. I hope you're going to take the time to review the entire report card and summary document. And you can find them at the link on the screen right now. We'll also issue a follow-up email to registered participants that will include the link to both the report and the summary document, along with the video of today's event. And apologies if we didn't get to all of your questions, but feel free, if you still have any burning questions, email us at sustainablela@ucla.edu. And with that, thank you and goodbye.